Hey, Zach here. Today we're at the historic Paw Paw Tunnel along the C&O Canal. We're going to check out this marvel of engineering which still survives today. We can actually walk through it, and we'll check out the surrounding area as well. We'll find some old canal locks, and there's actually an abandoned railroad bridge that I want to check out south of the tunnel as well. It should be a good one, but I hope you don't have claustrophobia. If you're used to the relative flatness of eastern Maryland, driving to the western part of the state can be quite a shock to the system. Going west from Frederick, the terrain actually gets quite vertical as you head into the region where the Allegheny Mountains cut across the state. These mountains were quite the headache for engineers in the early 19th century as they tried to extend their growing transportation networks west. Sometimes their solutions were so grand that they would outlive the very networks that they were designed for. On my way to visit one such engineering marvel, just north of Paw Paw, West Virginia, while navigating the windy roads through the hills, I came upon this site, known either as Prospect Peak or Panorama Peak. From this spot, on a clear day, you can see the mountains of Pennsylvania in the distance, but more prominently, we can see the Potomac River winding through the mountains with West Virginia on one side and Maryland on the other. This scene highlights the monumental feat that canal and railroad builders had to contend with as they followed the Potomac River west. National Geographic even deemed this one of the most beautiful spots in the U.S., and it's easy to see why. Continuing on along windy roads through the foothills and over Potomac tributaries, eventually I come to Paw Paw, West Virginia, named after the small trees that grow in the area. I crossed the Potomac back into Maryland, and just before reaching the C&O Canal trail access, I drove under this abandoned railroad bridge. My interest was naturally piqued, so I made a point to check it out after visiting the tunnel. As I was scanning the maps in the parking area, I saw this little guy crawling across, probably looking for the best bug-catching spot to build his next engineering marvel. From the parking area, it was a short walk up to the C&O Canal Trail. On the left is the bridge carrying Route 51 over the trail, but the tunnel is half a mile to the right. The canal bed is on the left here, with fairly large trees having grown in it since its abandonment. And the Potomac is off to our right, visible at least for the time being. Here we see the start of a trail that bypasses the tunnel by going up and over the mountain. I just had to stop and capture this interesting vine structure up in the trees. As we round this bend, the tunnel finally comes into view for the first time. But before we get any closer, maybe I should talk about the history of the Paw Paw Tunnel and explain exactly why the C&O Canal designers thought that such an impressive feat of engineering was necessary. The Chesapeake and Ohio Canal was envisioned as a transportation waterway that would connect the Chesapeake Bay with the Ohio River, thereby establishing an easily navigable waterway between mid-Atlantic markets and the expanding Western territories. By 1850, when the canal was completed from Washington, D.C. to Cumberland, Maryland, the company was deep in debt, and they realized that construction over the rugged mountains to Pittsburgh was wildly unrealistic. So they dropped their plans for the western section altogether, meaning the canal would never reach the Ohio River Valley that was part of its namesake. For the 184 miles of canal that were built, engineers had to contend with numerous obstacles. The first being terrain elevation. Over its entire length, the canal experienced an elevation change of 605 feet, which required a series of 74 locks to control water levels, enough to make boat travel possible. The second obstacle was natural impediments, like river tributaries in the path of the canal. Engineers handled these by building a total of 11 aqueducts, which can be thought of as water bridges, carrying the canal over low-lying areas or waterways without changing the level of the water in the canal. While the first two obstacles were natural in origin, the third came in the form of a competing transportation network, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. The canal and the railroad were being built at the same time, and both chose to follow the Potomac River on their path westward. This led to conflict, most famously in the region of Point of Rocks, Maryland, where the two companies wanted to use the same narrow strip of land along the river. The companies eventually came to a compromise there, sharing the patch of land, but each company would continue to experience limitations by the other as their respective construction progressed. By the time canal construction reached the Paw Paw Bends, defined by a series of 5 horseshoe-shaped bends in the river, the engineers had to get creative. To this point, the canal had stuck to the Maryland side of the river, in part to avoid conflict with the C&O Railroad, which was being built on the other side. But in the bends, the Maryland side of the river was comprised of steep terrain, through which the canal would have to carve clearance along a 5-mile section of winding river. It was decided that the best course of action was to instead route the canal overland, avoiding the bends altogether, but necessitating the construction of a 3,118-foot tunnel under the mountain ridge. Construction began in 1836, with an estimated completion in 1838. The tunnel project proved much more complicated and costly than expected, and was delayed for a number of reasons, including unrest amongst the workers and financial problems for the canal company. By the time it was finally completed in 1850, over a decade late, it had nearly bankrupted the canal company, which is likely a big factor in their decision to end construction in Cumberland instead of pressing on to the Ohio River. The tunnel was used by canal boats until the C&O closed down in 1924. Today, it is maintained as part of the C&O Canal National Historic Park. As we approach the south portal, you can see the rocky terrain that the workers had to dig through to complete the passage. Looking through the tunnel, it's amazing how straight the bore is, considering it was dug primarily with pick and shovel between regular black powder blasts. Here we can see the Tunnel Hill Trail branching off to the right. I'll save this trail for another time. I want to walk through the tunnel. Before that, though, I just couldn't resist climbing to the top of the portal. Although the water ends just south of the tunnel, you can just picture it as it was, continuing off toward Cumberland. Time to head inside. While there's a decent amount of light coming in through the portal at first, I'm soon glad I remembered to bring my flashlight. Even still, the darkness proved a little too much for my camera, so I apologize for the terrible quality in here. It takes nearly 15 minutes to walk through, And while it is an amazing experience, traversing this 175-year-old engineering marvel, I won't subject you to too much grainy footage. I do want to show you a couple things, though, along the way. The ceiling and walls are brick-lined, and in fact, about 5.8 million bricks were used in the tunnel's construction. A kiln was actually set up nearby to supply the bricks during construction. For the most part, the pathway is dry, although there are a couple of places where water seems to get through. All along the wall, there are these gaps in the brick. These are actually called weep holes, and they allow water to drain from behind the walls. Also, at regular intervals, are these National Park Service survey markers from March of 2002. Is it me, or does this puddle look like a paw print? Since the tunnel could only accommodate one lane of traffic, several methods were implemented to prevent traffic jams. One method was the use of lanterns, a red one on the stern and a white one on the bow, to let other boats know which direction the one in the tunnel was going. In general, the loaded boat heading downstream had the right of way, but at times that wasn't honored, and it wasn't unheard of for fistfights to break out over right-of-way disputes. While the brickwork is in mostly good shape, here is a section that seems to have collapsed off of the wall. It does give us a good idea of just how thick the brick layers are in the tunnel. In this area, the weep holes are much closer together, implying it is a place where more drainage was necessary. Even though it only took about 15 minutes, I was very grateful to reach the light at the end of the tunnel. Here we can clearly see the wooden bumpers on the far side, which helped to protect the brickwork from the passing canal boats. On this end, you emerge into this awesome cut in the hillside. And here we see back toward the north portal, with the stonework looking much the same as the south side. Again, I am compelled to climb to the top. From up here, we get a bird's eye view of this steep man-made valley. We can tell a lot of work has been done to prevent rock slides down onto the trail. And in fact, a couple of rock slides did occur as recently as in the 2010s, leading to the National Park Service initializing extensive work to stabilize the rock face, which finally completed in 2023. We can see evidence of these efforts all along this cut, which leads me to wonder just how different this all looks compared to the original construction. Those lighter colored sections look to me to be new additions designed to brace the rock above. Eventually, the wooden boardwalk ends. This looks like a spot where a rock slide might have occurred in the past. This narrow strip here was obviously cut out from the hillside to accommodate the towpath. Here are some wooden culverts for runoff. And on the wall above, lots of moss growth and root overhang. At first I thought these were corn stalks growing in the old canal. The path opens up here, and we see the Tunnel Hill Trail come back down to rejoin the towpath trail. Before long, we come to the first lock on this side of the tunnel, lock number 66. This one still has a little water in it. You can see here the indentation in the stone, likely from where the gate operating mechanism was attached. These concrete sections weren't original. They were added in 1910 to replace wooden gate pockets. I always get nervous walking over these wooden bridges. Supposedly there was a carpenter shop that existed here until the 1960s. I wonder if this is the remains of that structure. And over here is likely where the lock tender's house was. Here are the remains of a bypass flume that allowed water to pass around the lock to the level below. Next down the line, we have lock 64 2/3. You'll notice that we skipped lock number 65, or rather the canal company did. Originally, there was supposed to be a lock 65, but in a cost-saving measure, it was omitted by making the other locks in the area slightly higher. This lock still has some of the wooden sheathing in place on the inner walls. Here are the remnants of another bypass flume. Back along the towpath, we see a pile of stone that looks to be from the end of the lock. Also by the towpath is what I think might be the remnants of the lock tender's house, which was supposed to be around here on the towpath side. Next up, we are coming to lock 63 1/3. Again, there is a pile of stones on the side here. This lock looks much like the other two, except I did note that the concrete here has the date printed on it. There are no lock tender house remnants visible here. The canal bed looks to be pretty broad here at this curve where we rejoin the Potomac River Valley. In this area, I came upon this curious structure, which is not one of the numbered locks. There is a gate underneath, so I imagine this was intended to control water levels in this portion of the canal. It almost looks like an aqueduct, but there isn't supposed to be one in this area. If anyone else knows more about this, please let me know in the comments. I'm now approaching lock 62, which is the last one that I will see today. This lock was completely empty of water, giving us the best view of what the bottom of the locks looked like. Across the towpath, we have the ruins of the lock tender's house. And as before, on the far side of the lock is the remnants of the bypass flume. On the way back, I had to marvel at how the day had cleared up. It was cloudy when I started, and now total blue skies. As tired as I was on the way back, I still wanted to check out the abandoned railroad bridge, so I sat back and let the drone do my exploring for me. This trestle once carried the Western Maryland Railway across the Potomac. This railroad was a latecomer to the area, and therefore had to be a lot more creative with its routing. opting for multiple crossings of the river and several tunnels through the mountains, as it carved its way to Cumberland in 1906. After being acquired by the Chesapeake system, the line was abandoned in 1975 for being redundant with the existing B&O lines. We can see that not only are the rails gone, but there is a small section removed from the middle of the trestle. On the West Virginia side of the bridge, the old right-of-way disappears into the heavy overgrowth. And likewise, on the Maryland side, the right-of-way is very hard to discern. But it looks like it should cross the canal at some point. So I took back to the trail, this time heading the other way. And not too far down the trail, I came upon this old trestle crossing the canal and towpath. It wasn't too difficult to climb up and see the completely overgrown right-of-way. And this shot of the abandoned bridge with the moss-coated ties totally made the short climb worth it. Back on the path, I got this, one of my favorite shots, showing two modes of transportation that once competed for dominance in this valley, and both of which now stand abandoned, victims to the never-ending march of progress. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little visit to the Paw Paw Tunnel along the old C&O Canal in Maryland. There was definitely more walking than I was expecting, but the sights were well worth it. I'll be visiting another canal tunnel fairly soon. Unfortunately, with that one, you're not going to be able to walk through it, but it's still going to be pretty cool. Until next time, see you later.